Well, it's been a little while since I made a video. I haven't been doing any projects, so nothing really worth making videos over. The old the Jeep's been running good. Haven't had any problems. Haven't done anything with it really. Just since the 5.3, it's been great. It's been reliable. It's like I said in previous videos, it gets better fuel economy than it used to. Yeah, it's been great. Everything's holding up good. Transmission's holding up good. I was kind of worried about the AX15, but it seems to be I don't know, it still shifts good. Doesn't make any funny noises or anything. So, but anyways, I've been doing a lot of boating this summer with this thing, and it's a 455 Olds that I built for it, and it runs great. I mean, it's awful on fuel economy, but I mean, the problem with this boat is it being a jet. I've never had a jet before, and I got like kind of overconfident with the thing. You know how they don't draft hardly any water, and I started running rivers with it, and being on rivers, that it was like the most fun I've ever had in a boat. Like it's way more fun for me than just driving around a lake, just doing laps around the lake all day long. And I had a riot with it on the local rivers. There's a launch that's right near my house, and from there I have access to waterways, just miles and miles and miles of rivers. But the one day, like, it was inevitable. We bounced off a log, and it did a pretty substantial amount of damage to this boat. It broke the suction housing. It ripped one of the fins off the intake on the bottom, and it chewed up the bottom of the hull pretty good. And so I just kind of called it. I'm like, I'm not doing that anymore. Like, it's a fiberglass boat. It's not going to take it. It ain't going to take bouncing off of logs. So I started doing some thinking. Like, it's like, what do I got to do to be able to reliably run the rivers around here without worrying about damaging the boat? I mean, ultimately you have to go to an aluminum hull. So we're just going to leave this boat for running the lakes. Keep it in the, you can still run shallower water if you're familiar with the lake and stuff like that. But the rivers are just unpredictable. The logs are moving around. Everything's moving around on you all the time. So there's no, you can't really get accustomed to where the obstacles are going to be. So I went and bought a different boat. This thing here, it's a 15-foot StarCraft. It's kind of small. I paid practically nothing for the boat. It's narrow, but I think it's perfect. It's going to be lightweight. It's going to be a lot tougher. You'll be able to smash into shit with it, and not have to worry about ripping a hole in the bottom of the boat. It had a couple of kind of pedestal seats, and then it had like a bench seat. And obviously we've gutted everything out of it. The whole back of the old truck is right completely full because it had a wood floor, and the wood floor was rotted really bad. So we had to spend a couple nights gutting this thing out. But you look at the structure of this boat. It's built really tough. I mean, I know these things have problems with rivets leaking, and whatever. That's fine. Like I said before, I work for an industrial sandblasting and painting company, so I'm going to get this whole thing sandblasted inside and out, and then when I'm done setting the thing all up, I can just have it coated with the entire inside of it coated before I put an interior back in it. I'd like to get 4 seats back in the thing. And there's a lot of guys that are doing, they're using jet skis. They take an old junk jet ski and they cut the pump and the motor mounts and everything out of it, and they just graft it into the aluminum boat. Which, yeah, I'd like to do that ultimately too, but I want to do that with a different boat. Like this thing, I just want to be able to run the little bit deeper rivers around here, a little bit bigger rivers, but they're littered with logs, but you're not concerned as much about, getting into extremely shallow water with this thing. I just want to be able to run up and down these big rivers, and, every now and then you're going to hit a log, and you won't have to worry about it. But down the line, I'd like to build a little John boat too with a jet ski engine that I could go up into the even shallower rivers. So with this boat, instead of doing a jet ski pump and a little 2-cylinder, 3-cylinder, 2-stroke engine, I'm going to use. I bought I don't know what, it's probably a late 60s, early 70s Tahiti fiberglass boat. It was like a 19-foot boat. It was a project though. No trailer, no motor, no interior, but it had a pump, complete pump, and it already has a place diverter on it. So basically a trim nozzle, allowing you to trim the nozzle up and down. It was already on the pump, which I had to spend $900 to put one of those on that boat. So it was kind of a big, and I got the boat for $500. So I bought the boat, brought it home, cut the pump out of it, and here's the intake off of it. That was a nightmare, getting all the fiberglass and the epoxy cleaned off of that thing. But it's pretty much ready to go. There's your transom housing. There's the suction housing and the impeller, basically the pump. So it's pretty much everything I need to put the Berkeley in this thing. The contour of the bottom of the hull matches the intake pretty well. Maybe a little bit off, but whatever. You can always bend and pry and make the aluminum fit the intake. And they make different angle transom housings depending on the angle of the transom as well. And this one seems to be close enough that it will work as well. So you'll be cutting a big rectangular hole in the back here, and then cutting floor out in here, which is going to involve probably taking these two supports out. So there was wood on the inside of this transom, and I don't really want to put wood back in it. It's just ultimately going to rot. So we were going to reskin this entire transom after it got blasted, and then build the transom up to the same height as the gunnels here and make it so it just goes straight across. So then I'll have just a nice clean new transom to work with, all just a flat sheet of aluminum. Maybe even reskin the inside of it too, and then gusset the corners, and do whatever you got to do. There's not a lot of load transferred into the transom with this type of pump on a setback like a JE, or I can't remember the other pump that relies on the transom a little bit more. But a JC pump like this, there's really no load applied on the transom. It's just this thing just kind of plugs the hole in the back. So all of the load is going to be on the intake. You can see on the bottom of the intake you got a flange with bolt holes that would bolt into the fiberglass. So that flange, the depth that you see there between the flange and the bottom of the intake is really thick. It's meant to accommodate a fiberglass hull. So we're gonna have to cut the hole for this intake, and then it's gonna have to get spaced up. That flange is gonna have to get spaced up in order for it to sit flush. I was thinking maybe aluminum square tube or something like that the bolt holes could go down through and space that thing back up. If you know anything about Berkeley's, you're probably looking at this wondering why there's no fins on it. Well, I cut them off. They start up at the front and they go all the way back to the shoe, essentially, right where it starts to curve back in. And they're fins that hang down 3.5, maybe 4 inches down. Well, that was what contacted the log on the blue boat in there. That's what ended up causing all of the damage, because they hang down. I'm not exactly what they're there for. I don't know if it's just kind of a lateral stability, or if they do put them on there for some kind of means of preventing cavitation. I'm not sure. And if I hadn't have ripped one of them off of that boat, and it did not affect the performance of the boat at all, I probably would not have cut these off, because I would have been too concerned that it was going to cavitate. But like I said, the ones on that boat in there are half tore off, and they're just mangled right now, and it literally did nothing to the boat. The pump just doesn't care. It still runs the same top end. It still comes out of the hole the same. It doesn't cavitate. So I kind of figured in this application those fins are not going to be necessary, I guess. I don't know. We'll see. So it's just about ready to get blasted. I got to get the windshield off of it. I'm going to cut these little cubbies out the side of it, because I'm just going to make a deck that comes all the way up to the top of these gunnels and goes all the way up to the front of the engine. Now, in terms of the engine, I'm just going to use that 5.3 right there. There's a 6.0 down there. There's another 6.0 around the corner, around the other side of that 8.1. There's a 5.3 I got right here taken apart, but this one right here was a good running engine with a reasonable amount of miles on it. It is an iron block, so from what I've looked up, it seems like an iron block 5.3 long block is 500 pounds or so, and then the Berkeley pump is 120, 130 pounds, 140 pounds ish. So it's a pretty substantial amount of weight, for the that narrow of a beam. But I don't know. This is an experiment. It may be a miserable failure. The boat might draft too much. I don't know. But whatever. I want to try it. I don't think it's going to be that bad, because the engine is going to be in the very center, almost in the middle of the boat, with the pump set up. So it's going to be really evenly distributed. And for these LS motors, you can get front and rear aluminum motor plates. That bolt to the bell housing, holes in the back, and then in the front they use an assortment of holes in the front, and they just have big wings hanging off them, and you cut them to fit whatever you're putting it in, which is perfect for this application because they're aluminum. The boat's aluminum. The PTO for basically a little adapter flange that bolts to the back of the crank to go over to a Berkeley driveline. Those are only $100 now. They used to be a lot cheaper, or a lot more expensive. And then they make these small little plates that bolt in place of where the water pump bolts, that convert the 4 holes right over to pipe. So it's perfect. You run your cooling water off of your pump into 2 of them, and then out 2 of them and into your manifolds. and in terms of the manifolds, that's where you can really break your budget. So I put and I knew a Ford Windsor engine had very similar port spacing compared to an LS engine. They have the same valve layout, intake, exhaust, intake, exhaust, intake, exhaust. And sure enough, I checked a Windsor gasket up against an LS truck exhaust manifold, and it's practically identical. So the bolt pattern is obviously different on the cylinder heads, and the port shape is very different. Windsor is like a rectangle port. The LS is like an oval, round, depending on the heads. But my little brother picked up a set of Mercruiser Marine Ford 302 manifolds for me that I'll see next time I see him. He's down in the Detroit area. I'm a few hours north of him, so there was nothing up here for under $700-800. So I hunted around and found a set at a marine salvage down in that area, so he picked them up. So what I was planning on doing is taking header flanges, buy 2 header flanges for an LS, buy 2 header flanges for a Ford 302, and then essentially create some kind of an adapter. It may be kind of a project. It may take a while to make that work, but the LS engine specific marine manifolds are extremely expensive. They are astronomically priced. So even if it takes me days to try and adapt those manifolds over to that 5.3, it's still worth it in my opinion. So we'll put, I was going to put stringers in this thing, start with like aluminum rectangle tube and run them all the way up until it starts to, the contour starts to change up there. Then I'll go all the way to the front, and then box them in back and forth here and there. I'll probably have to reskin back here where the intake mounts. These panels are, in between the supports here. I'll probably maybe take a little bit thicker aluminum and lay it down and double this up, so there's a lot of support for the base of the intake, because there's a lot of stress on that. The engine will be 4-point mounted. It won't be like the Blue Boat in there, where the back of the engine is resting on the pump, which is it's not a sustainable means of mounting the engine, especially if you're going to be bouncing off of rocks and logs. So the engine will be isolated with its own mounts resting on the stringers up in here, and then you'll have your pump mounted back here, which will so the engine will be 2/3 of the way into the boat up here. So we're going to struggle a little bit to get 4 seats in this thing. Obviously, it's not a very big boat, but I one way or another, I want 4 seats in it. It's not fun for me if I'm just going out doing this by myself. I want to be able to bring some buddies along. So, I have, off of that jet boat that I bought, I got 2 of these aluminum saddle tanks that would fit right in this thing. Really nice. They're in good shape. They may have to be recertified and re-tagged to be able to be legal for the Coast Guard, because I couldn't find any tags on them. But I also have this poly tank that came out of this boat that was up in the bow, which is 19 gallons. And as long as I want to drive, I almost don't want to rely on one or the other. Like, I'm debating on maybe running all 3 of them. I could mount the saddle tanks back in here, or maybe up towards the middle a little bit, and then just put that poly tank back up in the bow where it was. Because you'd be looking at, almost 60 gallons of fuel. You don't necessarily have to fill it up all the way if you don't want to, but if need be, maybe you're going on a really long haul. Like, I can, from that boat ramp right around the corner from here, I can drive just miles as long as I have a boat that'll do it. So it would be nice to be able to have a lot of fuel capacity in this thing. What else is there? And I did a lot of research and looking at all the Coast Guard regulations on, what all the things that you're supposed to do. They're surprisingly laxed on the engine itself. I figured, I would have to have some kind of marine compliant fuel injection system or something, but I haven't found anything along those lines. There's a lot of laws or regulations involving the fuel system itself, the tank, the fittings, the hose, the clamps, the type of pump that you use, how far the pump is from the engine, having spark arresters on the fuel vents. But all that stuff isn't necessarily. It's not like it's hard to do. The electrical system as well, you got to be really mindful. You got to use the correct type of wire and all this kind of stuff. I've never done something like this before, so. Apparently, if you keep, what I've been told, you keep all your receipts, and you write down a description of, it's a kind of a quick overview of how you put the boat together, how you assembled it, and basically the Secretary of State will assign you a new hull identification number and give you your MC numbers, which is what we have in Michigan, obviously, and essentially it's like a new boat. So I don't know. We'll see how that works. I can't think of anything else. The bottom of the hull, obviously you have thin aluminum. If you hit a rock or something along those lines, you're going to tear a hole in the bottom of the boat, obviously. So, and what a lot of guys do when they know that they're going to be bouncing off a lot of obstacles, logs or rocks, is they line the bottom of these things with a ultra high molecular volume, like a high density plastic. So you got a strike going down the middle here on the keel, and then you got two more on the outside of the hull. So I figured I'd go in between those, and we'll put the plastic on it while I got the hull flipped over when I'm setting the intake. And they usually say to glue and screw that stuff. So I think after you do that, you pretty much got an indestructible little boat. It doesn't weigh anything, so it's going to have a little bit of weight to it with that 5.3 in there. But and ideally, I'd like to. It'd be nice to have an aluminum block. You could shave 100 pounds. But people want too much money for those things. I don't. I buy iron block 5.3s and 4.8s. I can buy them every day of the week for $300, including the engine, the harness, and the PCM. Good running engines. And the aluminum block ones, the price goes up to 2-3 times, at least around where I'm at. I've heard of people getting them for a reasonable price elsewhere, but I haven't seen them around here. You just don't see them that often come up for sale. So I think I'm just going to be stuck with the iron block. In terms of the fuel injection, I probably am just going to run the factory GM PCM, and if I can figure out a means of wiring in a couple O2 sensors, then I will do that. If I can't, then I'm probably just going to see if we can get it tuned close enough. Anything would be better than a carburetor. I don't want to be 2, 3, 4 hours away from the ramp and be having stupid issues with the carburetor. I'm pretty fluent in carburetors, but they're just ultimately not as reliable. I think everybody knows that. I don't necessarily know I'm gonna see an increase in fuel economy in this application over a carburetor, but I'd rather do fuel injection. I don't know. I'd like to be able to run this boat even when it starts to get kind of cold. You know, where you've got the other boat winterized and you got it stored and put away. Like, I'd still be able to like to run this thing. You know, maybe put a like a cover or something over the back and build kind of, you know, like a top for it or something like that. So it's somewhat comfortable in here. You can run this thing well into, you know, late fall, you know, and then get it out real in a real early spring. It's only got to be 55 degrees out, and I would love to go run up and down the rivers. You know, that's when the depth of the rivers is higher anyways. It's safer, so we'll see. I've never put a LS into a boat, so I wanted to see how it should be a stupid simple wiring harness. I should be able to mount the PCM like essentially right on the engine and build just this little tiny harness. The coils are going to have to get relocated down on the side of the block, and the wires are going to have to come up to the plugs because of the nature of the manifolds. But still, the harness itself should be just stupid simple to set up. So, well, that's the project that I'm delving into, and I'll keep you guys informed. I should be putting the transmission back together in my old Chevelle in there, but I even have the parts to do it. It's just sitting on the bench. The transmission's all tore down. It would probably take me like 3 hours to put it back together. It's just an old 4-speed Borg Warner Super T10. It was like halfway through, most of the way through summertime, and the damn car's still sitting there. I haven't even drove it yet because I'm so caught up in these stupid boat ideas. But I'll keep the videos coming here on our progress with this thing. It's going to be interesting, you know, taking a little boat that had probably a 40 horse outboard on it at one point in time and putting a 300 horsepower V8 in it. So, but yeah, this is America. That's what's great about living in this country. Anyways, yeah, I'll keep you informed. We're going to keep chugging away on this thing, so the progress will be going along pretty quickly. So, yeah, thanks for watching.